A Plague Tale: Innocence was something of a surprise hit for developers Asobo and publishers Focus Home Interactive. Being Asobo's first new and self-made IP since 2009, and being completely at odds with the slew of action, racing, and movie licensed games they would typically develop, they'd have an uphill struggle to get the recognition that they sought. With this cinematic stealth horror set to release in early spring of 2019 as well, they may have been betting against the odds just a bit. However, through the power of some excellent marketing with their extremely well-crafted trailers packed to the brim with amazing quotes and ratings, leaving just enough unsaid to keep the viewer intrigued, the general public began to take notice. A Plague Tale: Innocence looked cool. It looked dark and mysterious. It looked dirty. It looked next gen on current hardware. Most importantly, A Plague Tale: Innocence looked different. Different is precisely what the horror landscape was needing at the time. This wasn't another horror game about zombies or zombie-like creatures with a different name. It didn't just place you in some big mansion to solve puzzles while being stalked by the occasional crazy person, nor did it make you wander aimlessly in the woods with a dying flashlight while random things jumped out at you like a cheap trick we've seen 1,000 times before. A Plague Tale: Innocence was fresh. Though it didn't come out with a massive bang, its reputation spread gradually, being nominated for many awards and eventually breaking 1 million in sales just a year after its release. Similarly, though often a creepshow of filth and decay, A Plague Tale: Innocence has many suitably quiet and meditative thought-provoking moments that are sure to build on the player gradually and linger with them long after the journey has come to an end. You play primarily as Amicia, the eldest daughter of the Darun Lordship. Here, on your family's estate, you can wander around at your own leisurely pace and just absorb the period piece setting. To some, maybe the idea of this woman here casually defeathering a chicken may come off as shocking or gross. But in context, it's nothing more than world flavor, a nice detail in creating a sense of accuracy for the time period. Amicia, as the eldest daughter, has taken it upon herself to go beyond the traditional roles women are expected to play in her society. She steps up to learn hunting skills, among other things that are normally reserved for the men. Though this is something she enjoys, it's also not entirely by choice, as her younger brother Hugo is weak, potentially terminally ill, and in need of all the protection his family can give him. When this game begins is the day that protection becomes a necessity. Deep in the woods, a tragedy unfolds around this seemingly infested, otherworldly hole in the ground. But this is just one sign of bad things that are going on outside and around the Darun estate. Before the Darun family can start answering the questions of this mysterious hole, an unexpected foe arrives on the scene. The Inquisition believes the Darun family to be the cause of an ongoing plague of rats, infecting all nearby villages and leaving piles of dead in their wake. And so they demand to take the family in to meet with their leader, killing all in their path whom they see no use in. Amicia, with Hugo in tow, is forced to run from home as the Inquisition rampages through her family's estate. From here, Amicia and Hugo must find their way to safety and to a local doctor who can help Hugo with his condition. But the world is ravaged everywhere they go. Villages are torn apart and the remaining survivors have given into hysteria. Farms are buried beneath the mounds of their slaughtered livestock. Darkness stretches all around to grant safe passage for the teams of rats that decimate every landscape. The Inquisition hides around every corner in search of the missing Darun children, and a mystery about the Darun family and the church's interest in them begins to unfold. Though an interesting world and setting, as the mystery begins to unfold, it did begin to feel a bit more like a story I'd heard a few times before. Towards the later third of the game as well, it began to feel like the pace was jumping around a bit, as if big chunks or important establishing scenes were cut entirely as production costs were going up. It never makes it hard to understand what's going on, but it does make it feel a little more random than it should. But despite these issues, A Plague Tale succeeds wonderfully in what it sets out to do, which is two things primarily. Through its visuals and its grotesque landscapes, it aims to not just disgust the player, but make them feel as filthy as everything else appears. Wading through 5,000 rendered rats with nothing but the soft glow of small torches to keep you safe was bad enough, but every corpse and pile of livestock you come across has a unique way of wiggling its way under your skin and filling you with a disgusting sense of morbid curiosity and abject horror. In contrast to this, the other thing A Plague Tale sets out to do is to paint a landscape of family ties and struggles. Amicia's main focus is on her younger brother Hugo, and providing the support their now absent mother otherwise would. And what this means for her is a great deal of sacrifice, labor, and the occasional lie in hopes to keep him protected. The struggles these characters face is ever present in the narrative, and through each unfolding incident, we see how Amicia's actions sway the young and developing mind of poor innocent Hugo, and what the logic of a child's mind can create of her actions and her decisions. In addition to Hugo and Amicia, we see these themes repeated in two of our side characters, Melly and her twin brother, Arthur. Often these two can be found in heated debate and argument over how to progress. Many times these arguments include the idea of leaving Amicia and Hugo behind and seeking safety elsewhere, as the two de Rune children are sure to bring danger with them everywhere they go. But personal safety is not usually the prime reason for these arguments, but rather it's for the safety of their sibling. Over and over we see siblings vying to protect one another at great cost to themselves, and in contrast to what they may believe is morally right. It's these themes more than anything that make A Plague Tale: Innocence a memorable experience. There was one character, however, who doesn't exactly fill this role, at least not in any graceful regard, and I have to say this was not a character I enjoyed at all.
Well done. You won't be getting up anytime soon, trust me.
He felt like he was introduced because the plot needed him, and the writers had no ideas for him as a character at all. And so he ends up being this really watered down, generic, one-liner spouting guy who feels like he fits in with a modern superhero movie far more than this otherwise really grounded period piece.
Do you do that a lot?
No, but I'm starting to like it.
But he was just one character from the roster, and the time he has in the game is pretty limited overall. So it didn't hurt too much. It just made me roll my eyes a few times in a game that otherwise gave me no reason to. But as much as the characters and their collective human struggles, as well as the intense and extremely graphic imagery kept me interested, the gameplay was a bit of another story to me.
They gave their lives for England. What if it were you? You'd want a decent burial, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you? Come on then! Guyenne is ours!
It's not that the gameplay is bad, really it's quite alright, but I did find myself getting bored of it from time to time. A Plague Tale: Innocence is a stealth game, and where we play as children that makes a lot of sense. Direct combat against adults in full suits of armor and with soldiers training certainly wouldn't make sense at all. As such, when you attempt to do this,
Amicia!
one hit is all it's gonna take to bring you to the game over screen, and game overs can come quick and often if you're not careful. Most stealth game staples are active here and will see you crouching around through tall patches of grass and behind ledges or chest-high walls to avoid the soldiers. Aggro meters above their heads will alert you to their alert of you. Thankfully this isn't too unforgiving, but it does lead to a lot of classic must-be seeing things moments, at times when you know no logical person would come to that conclusion.
Nothing.
Yeah, totally. That small band of very unique looking children that you just seen crouch walk from one set of covering to another, yeah, definitely, you just imagined it. And the next 3 times we go in front of you as well, you would have just imagined those too. It's safe to say enemy AI isn't exactly the best, but then enemy AI in stealth games, when it's too good, can easily cripple the experience. To help you navigate these maps, Amicia has a small set of tools at her disposal. Her slingshot is her main offensive weapon. One well-aimed rock to the unarmored head is enough to take any soldier down. However, a soldier with a helmet may take an additional attack first from a corrosive material made to melt the steel of their helmet before going in for the kill shot. It's not much, but it makes for some alright on-the-spot decision-making and tactical action. The slingshot, though, does make a bit of noise, so it's often in your best interest to just throw items instead, often with the purpose being to create noise elsewhere and cause a distraction. The control of light and dark is also cornerstone to the gameplay, not just in keeping you hidden, but also in providing ways to attack the enemies. Every human in the game moves around by firelight, by necessity, as any area without light can easily be overrun with rats. One of the tools you can craft with the items you gather around the world can be used to light fires, sconces, and torches, while another can be used to douse the flames. So it stands to reason then, if the enemies are secure in the light, then dousing the light should make them vulnerable. And if the rats are close by, then you can rest assured they will not make it out alive. And these murder by rats moments can really create an effect. At first, they feel really highly disturbing in ways the Willard movie only wishes it could have been. And by the end, they still feel pretty darn disturbing. Other craftables can be used as a defensive measure for when enemies get too close, while others can work as bait to move hordes of rats around. As you get more towards the later portions of the game, you unlock more abilities that help you do much of the same stuff in a more efficient and more cost-effective manner, but it ultimately ends up being just more of the same sort of thing. And while the gameplay loop isn't bad, the sneaking around, choosing when or when not to engage, taking out your enemies in tactical ways, controlling the lights and the rats, it is a pretty slow, often dreary form of action that after playing for a handful of hours at a time can make you wish for something else. A few of the zones do have some light puzzle elements, and there are a couple chase sequences in the game, but they largely lack the cinematic aspect needed to make them feel high tension or interesting, and usually come off feeling like all you're really doing is running, like Mario without a need to jump. The environments around you may look cool, but it's not as engaging as I wish. But on the note of environments, let's look at some technical aspects, as this is one area of the game where a Plague Tale really shines. The big technical feat here is, of course, the rats. The absolute insane amount of them on screen at once. Statements from the developers indicate there are up to 5,000 of them. However, some of it is done by illusion, where evidently the ones furthest from the character are not actually animated at all. This is something I honestly didn't notice. Maybe as I was so blinded by the spectacle at the front and center of my vision that I couldn't quite focus on what was happening beyond that. Outside of that, the game is really just quite gorgeous. Highly detailed textures and environments, as well as character models and some really good lighting and foliage effects, make this a very eye-catching experience. Because the game does target a sense of realism, I can see this game looking dated pretty quick. And granted, some areas do look worse than others and already have a bit of that last-gen, Oblivion-esque kind of dated charm to them, but they are few and far between. As beautiful as the game came out, it's not like it's exactly a mega blockbuster or anything with a budget of something akin to a Star Wars Battlefront 2. And so I was rather shocked and impressed it came out looking as nice as it did. For me, there was only two areas technically I felt a bit let down by. One came among some of the various character animations. Some animations, frankly, just look a bit stiff and awkward, but it was a pretty easy thing to adjust to. The only other area that bothered me, and this one bothered me a lot early on, is the chromatic aberration. And no, chromatic aberration is not just a fantastic tomb from Native Construct. The chromatic aberration in this game is intense, and at least on PS4, it cannot be fully disabled. At the worst of times, this makes things look sickly and blurry and far more low res than they really are. Though you can't turn it off, you can at least turn it down. And while this helps some, it doesn't quite help enough. It just turns it low enough that eventually, maybe, you'll stop noticing in time. And while I did get used to it, I feel this game could easily look better without it. The OST in A Plague Tale is pretty good. The sound effects too, I would say, are pretty on point, with the sound effects of the rats especially being a major highlight. And though most of the game targets photorealism as their art style, eventually they introduce things with more deliberate design, and these things are always fun to witness. Shout out to the member of the design team who's as big of a Zdzisław Beksinski fan as I am. And no, despite being a big fan, I can't pronounce his name quite right. The game has 3 voice options: English, French, and German. The French VO is probably the best, and certainly fits the aesthetics the best, but this is not a game I wanted to spend my time reading the subtitles in. The English, while not as good, is hardly noticeably worse, and so I left the game in English. I did check out the German out of curiosity, and though I don't speak German, it's not good. Granted, I checked out a very small portion, but the bit I did hear was extremely wooden.
Das sind Nelken. Ich hatte auch welche in meinem Herbarium. Aber diese hier sind schöner.
Hugo, wir müssen weiter.
Warte, komm mal her.
Was?
Die wird...
Oh, ils ont tout cassé.
Qu'est-ce qui se passe ici?
Peut-être qu'ils bricolent des lits plus grands.
Je ne pense pas, non.
The Robert de Rune, coat of
We are
arms.
his children. We are looking for Laurentius, the doctor. Do you know him?
Yes, I know him. And I know he used to look after your family.
Throughout the game, I found stability decent enough and never encountered many major glitches. This isn't a long game, clocking in at around 9 to 11 hours, but it's not a game that would have needed to be much longer either. Maybe an hour more at the most to flesh out some of the late game pacing better and maybe give one of our characters some more to chew on to hopefully make his arc feel a little more meaningful. But otherwise, yeah, this is a pretty good game and a great game for a new IP that I'm happy to see has seen such great success. If you like horror at all and are tired of all the zombie games, this is one you'll want to check out. And that's all I'm gonna say on A Plague Tale: Innocence, ladies and gentlemen. If you liked the video or found it useful at all, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the video if you can. Links to all my socials and the Patreon support page are in the description below, and as always folks, thanks for watching.